This is an urgent news bulletin for all my subscribers. I want to say this. George Fludas and I are going in on a Led Zeppelin Experience YouTube channel. I don't know what we're going to call it. Something clever, I hope. But where we'll probably make most of the videos at his place. We'll make some here too. But remember, this is still Bonzoleum Studios. And when I almost feel like, you know what it's like? I told him this yesterday, and I know it sounds egotistical, but check this out. Do you know what the police were great, and everybody loved the police. 1 + 1 + 1 was a trillion. And then Sting kind of went on his own. And he's a good musician, man. He is. I mean, pretty much all those songs were Sting's. But they policeified him. That's what they call it. Like Stuart Copeland and Andy Summers transformed them as this organic unit into ass-kicking music. It's almost like it's the opposite with me. Like, I'm not saying I'm Sting, but I mean, I do a pretty decent job with Bonzoleum. But now it's going to be like me and George merged together. Like chocolate and peanut butter in the 70s with the Reese's, well, I guess Reese's peanut butter cups are older than that. But remember, like, your chocolate fell in my peanut butter. Like at the movie theater, somebody eating a chocolate bar. They drop it off the balcony. And somebody's sitting in the movie theater with an open jar of Jif, like, you know what I'm saying? So, but that's what we're going to do, man. It's going to be great. We're going in halfsies. So it's going to be just, I don't know what else to say. It's just terrific. But I do want to say this. Okay, this is important. George Fludas is an active gigging Chicago area national. He's like he's kind of a big deal. He is, okay? He's as we know, he's an incredible drummer. But you really got to see him like in his, well, actually, Bonneville really is sort of like his essence. What is it? Somebody in their element? But he has a jazz element, man. Like, if you sat down and really watched him at a gig with jazz musicians, you'd be like, wow. You'd actually use the word cat. You'd be like, wow, this cat is, like, I hate when people use, I mean, not when diehard jazz, old time, younger people say it, I think it's like an affectation. But anyway, you'd be like, God, this frickin' cat, I mean, he's a monster. I mean, anyway, but here's the deal. This is important, too. When I make these videos with Fludas, like, he comes over like last minute. It's not something we plan out months in advance and he sits and practices for. This is important, man. George normally plays like a little 18, 12, 14 all the time. But because he was such a diehard Zeppelin fan 35, 40 years ago when he was little and got all that stuff down then, he kind of just off the top of his head sometimes just plays kind of what he sort of remembers about it. And it's still 99% I mean, it's 100, it's perfect. So what I'm saying is this. If there was like a patron out there that said, George, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to give you X amount of money, don't work any gig. He literally goes out and hustles gigs, man. He's an actual musician. Where somebody said, for the next 2 weeks, George, spend 5 hours a day or 8 hours a day in the basement woodshedding specific Zeppelin-y Bonham stuff. He'd probably only need a day and a half, if that, where everything he'd do would be, I'm not talking, I mean, everything, the feel, I mean, the sound is already there, his feel's already there, his technique's already there. I'm talking about like arrangement-y things. Stuff you just got to kind of remember and shore up in your head just as far as what was, like nitpicky. It's true, dude, Dude'sicles, you should have been, I was standing there. It was like me walking around Bonham's drums at Royal Albert Hall, man. I mean, the way he was playing, but the way the drums sounded. And the funny thing is with the iPhone, the homogenization of the floor toms and the bass drum actually, in that video with those wood drums, was actually very Vista-lighty. Not the doinky tone, but it was the perfect Bonham woody tone. But there were times he was hitting the floor toms where by the nature of the iPhone, you couldn't really tell if he was hitting the floor tom or the bass drum. It was real authentic Bonhamdom. Yeah, so it's going to be great, man. We might get other musicians. Like, we'll sit around and be like, we'll get into arguments. Like, yeah, screw you, man. Zeppelin 2, here's Zeppelin 3. I know they say that, Since I've Been Loving You was recorded in '69, but they redid it, man. There's no way that, there's not two versions, like that kind of stuff. Or like, there's no, well, we all know there's a Ritchie ring in Bonham's bass drum heads. Real fast, Wally Dellenbach sent me photographs that I'd never seen before from Iceland, 1970. Zeppelin playing in Iceland, 1970, where Bonham has freshly gotten his green sparkle kit. 26, 14, 16, 18, where the rack tom is on a snare stand. There's no rail on the drum yet. He probably was like, we'll do it just like we did with the thermogloss. But I was like, wait a minute, it's a 10 by 14 screw. We'll just get the rail. Isn't that just cool as hell? Wally keeps sending me cool pictures like that. Again, hopefully Jimmy Page will make some sort of a documentary, or at least we can... Wait a minute. This is 2018. Let's see what the heck's coming down the Jimmy Page pipeline. And happy birthday yesterday to Jimmy Page. He's January 9th, 1944 or 5, I think. I want to say 45, but maybe I'm wrong. But his birthday was yesterday when we were at George's doing all that Royal Albert Hall stuff, which Royal Albert Hall deliciousness video and footage and soundtrack we've seen that we talk about, that Eddie Kramer produced, or engineer Jimmy Page produced at Royal Albert Hall. The great stuff for Bonham sound terrific, and the Stereo sounds never better recorded. That was January 9th, 1970. So there we were, 48 years to the day, playing Bonham stuff. And there was George Fludas nailing it like it hadn't been nailed by any human being since January 9th, 1970. And it was Jimmy Page's birthday, so it's a glorious thing. That's why this is a... Videos following soon. Next time I'm at Fludas's, I'm going to have this microphone, that board, and that camera. So, again, I really appreciate, George and I really appreciate the fandom. You know why? Because I'm going to tell you, I'm pretty sharp. Over the years when I was younger, I realized how many Zeppelin-ophiles and Bonham-ophiles were out there. It's almost like the movie... They Live. Like, you put the sunglasses on, there's a whole hell of a lot of us. Like, everybody's walking around. Instead of, like, the eyes or the skull face, we just have the 3 rings, and we're kind of like, I'm serious. More videos on the way. Please subscribe.